Spend around 40% of your time on making or producing or creative stuff, 40% on marketing, around 10% indeed on professional development, research, and about 10% on administration.
You're listening to Thrive by Design, business, marketing, and lifestyle strategies for your jewelry brand to flourish and thrive. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Thrive by Design podcast. Can you believe it? We're here on episode number 64. And we are at about the year marker of running this podcast, which is just so crazy to me because I don't know where the time went. I felt like we just started it and now we've already had a year's worth of podcasts. And if you remember, we have some really juicy episodes from when we started. So I really, really encourage you to go back through the archives and start with episode number 1 if you're new to listening to the podcast. So here we are, just over a year of having this podcast launch, and we are at episode number 64. And as you know, we're at the end of October right now, and this time of the year is really busy for all of us. You know, we're coming into the holiday season, sales in the jewelry industry, you know, this is really the pivotal sales time, and there's a lot to be thinking about. But one of the things that we don't want you to have fall by the wayside is starting to think about and plan for next year. So today I have a very special guest on the podcast, Patricia Akker of the Design Trust. She is joining us from London, UK, and you are gonna love this episode today because we're gonna talk all about practical planning with creative vision. And I think as creative people and creative entrepreneurs, specifically jewelers, we oftentimes love the process of actually making a piece of jewelry, but we don't spend enough time probably on business development and thinking about how we're going to achieve our goals. So I think you're going to really love today's episode. Patricia and I talked about some really interesting ways to split up your time, and then also how to break down planning to make it fun and creative for you so that you're actually working towards a vision for your year and not making this so analytical, but making actually planning fun. So I'm excited to dive into practical planning with creative vision with Patricia Akker. Before we get started though, I would love to take a moment to take a word from our sponsors. Today's sponsor is NinaDesigns.com. Nina Designs is a wholesale jewelry supply company started by a jewelry designer for jewelry designers. And we just love what Nina offers to the jewelry community and to the emerging artist community. Her designs are really unique and she has very special things, especially for emerging designers who want to break out into a jewelry business and really grow their jewelry business. Nina is awesome. She has a really wonderful business savvy sense, Nina Cooper, the owner of Nina Designs. And we're very excited to invite her to speak at our live event in New York City in September. Nina is really cool. She's always supporting the jewelry community, and I'm excited to have her give back. So it's another reason, another one of our preferred vendors who's really in favor of supporting jewelry artists who are emerging in the jewelry industry. And she's so supportive that she has offered the Flourish and Thrive Academy and the Thrive by Design community a $10 discount off of your order over at NinaDesigns.com. And you can claim that by entering the code THRIVE at checkout. Once again, pop on over to NinaDesigns.com, enter the code THRIVE, and get $10 off your order. And I want to mention that it's a one-time use per customer. So pop on over to Nina Designs after the show. Okay, let's dive right in. Today, I'm really excited to have a very special guest with me today, Patricia Akker of the Design Trust. Patricia, welcome to the show.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Well, I've known Patricia for several years now. She is one of our strategic partners over at Flourish and Thrive Academy, and we've done a lot together. And I wanted to ask her on the show today because at this time of the year, it's a really wonderful time to start thinking about how you're creating your vision for your business and how planning is sort of wrapped into that vision. So I'm excited to have you here today because, Patricia, I know you have a lot to share about that topic.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially, I think, because, of course, this is a very busy time of the year, but I think especially when you're really busy, actually taking out like 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes a week can really make such a difference to keep that head cool and keep the stress away, I would say. So absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So for those of you who don't know Patricia, I thought I would start out with a formal introduction of Patricia, and then we'll just dive in and chat about creative vision and such, if that makes sense. Cool. So Patricia van den Akker is the director of the Design Trust, the online business school for designers and makers based in London, England, with more than 50,000 visits a month. She is passionate about helping creative professionals create the right business for themselves, their families, and their clients. She regularly talks and writes about creative business development and strategy, marketing and selling, business models, and costing and pricing. She is known for being able to connect the dots between the different parts in a creative business, asking those difficult questions you prefer to avoid, and for inspiring creatives to take action to create more successful businesses. All right, you are just a genius, because I know that a lot of creatives and jewelry designers alike like to avoid some of the tough questions. And so I'm excited to dive in today.
Because indeed, like it's not just the things that go well, but I think indeed, like what I love to really do is of course hear fantastic success stories, but just dig a little bit deeper and see what people are not mentioning and the things that they try to avoid and what we can do about them. Because very often the solution is a lot easier than running away from it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's so true. And, I really think that facing any sort of, I don't want to call it a problem or an issue, but like facing your business head on and sort of addressing those difficult questions and issues is like the way to get through them. Avoiding them just makes them expand, right?
What I think is interesting there is indeed like creatives, like in a way you have very often the solutions, and it is indeed like being creative about it. And one of the things that I've really seen with people who succeed is that they take it on the chin, as they say here in England. I don't know if it's an expression in the States as well. But
what's it called? Wait, say that again. What's it called?
It's like take it on the chin. So it's
take it on the chin. Okay.
Yeah. If you've got a challenge, deal with it. But also, indeed, like what is interesting with successful businesses is that they have the same challenges as all of us, but they see it as a learning opportunity. And it's really interesting. They don't call it a failure. Mm-hmm. It's actually part of the path. And like actually how to overcome that is what makes them successful and interesting. Because stuff happens to all of us, but it's how you deal with that that makes a difference.
That's so true. That was like a huge theme at Flourish and Thrive Live last month when we had all the designers together. One of the things that we realized, and especially in our mastermind day with our mastermind group, was that I kept using that term, the struggle is real. Like everyone's sort of facing the same problems. It's how you handle it, and it's how you move forward and move through it. And if you're going to sit around and whine about your problems instead of do something about it, you're going to get more of the same instead of actually moving through it and learning from that challenge or whatever.
Absolutely. And I really love that short book by Seth Godin, indeed,
yes.
The Dip. And I very often recommend it.
Repeat the title, because I said something while you were saying that. The book by Seth Godin called
The Dip. And he very much talks about, we all have, especially if we are like, I had that very much as a revelation when I studied to be a creative coach. And I really knew like, I had this great insight. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, I felt really, really down. And my coach says, that's perfect. And I was a bit puzzled by that. And she says, very often when we really get great insights, the follow-on response is that then you start to question yourself, then like imposter syndrome comes up and things like that. It's a very natural response psychologically. And actually it's like, if you then can go through that and work with that and come out on top, that's what makes you different from the people who are not going to succeed.
Absolutely. Well, aren't so many golden nuggets already, and we haven't even heard about your journey or your story. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you became the director of the Design Trust and a little bit about your journey into helping creatives?
So basically it all started, I would say, in hindsight, of course, because that's a good thing, is my mom had a creative business in Holland. She ran a craft shop and a gallery there. And indeed in Holland this was where I grew up. My dad was the alpha male businessman. So I think in me the DNA of both the creative and the entrepreneurial side have come together. And indeed I've got another sister who runs a creative business. So we're not strangers to sort of running our own businesses. I've been in London now for 23 23 years, and I've always worked with creatives. I studied first graphic design, then arts management, but from very early on, my tutor said to me, like, Patricia, you're a great designer, you're good visually, but actually managing people, that's what your strength is. And I think that was really useful to know that from a very early age. And indeed, like, that's what I love doing. My first job here in England was working for the Crafts Council, which was fabulous. Basically, I did work placement here, an internship, and then they offered me a job within 2 weeks. And I phoned back home and I said, I'm going to stay a bit longer. My mom waited for a couple of years, but basically 23 years later, I'm still here. And it's very much from that I've always worked with creatives in very different kind of jobs. And indeed, like at the beginning of the millennium, I worked for the organization, the Design Trust, which was set up originally by a design journalist here in the UK. And she died, and basically it was taken over by a university, and they then approached me again 5 years ago. And I very much wanted to run it as an online business school, because I think then we can reach a lot more people, but also indeed for me, because I've got a young family, it really works for my hours. And also indeed, like, most of my clients are parents. Yeah, many of my clients are indeed women with young families. And it's a fantastic way to learn online, to get to know each other, and to do international things like this. I very much love that. So it really works for me.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's amazing. And I'm so glad that you shared your journey. And it seems pretty obvious why you're passionate about creative business, but more specifically, are there other reasons why you're really passionate about helping creative business owners?
What I love is basically people have a purpose, and it's about kind of that bigger thing, isn't it? It's yes, it's great if you make money with it, of course, but for me, it's about seeing that sparkle in people's eyes when they realize I can do this, or I can make my living with that special skill I've got. When they realize that there are other people doing it, because very often, of course, we hear like, oh, as a creative, you can't make any money. And actually, there are loads of fabulous businesses out there doing it. And if I can get people indeed to realize, okay, it's not always easy, you need to work for it, but it is possible to make a living from what you love doing.
Yes.
That's fabulous. And of course, as creators, we make the world a better place, I think. Yeah, more beautiful, more connected. We create products that might be with us for hundreds of years to come. Yeah, I think it's very much part, again, also of a culture. I very much love crafts in that sense, because it is domestic, it is usable, it is something saying about how we live our lives at certain times in the timeline, so to speak. And I think that direct connection with crafts is something that I definitely love. I am a lot better with designers and makers than, for example, with visual artists because of that reason.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. So, we're talking today about practical planning and how that's connected with creative vision and actually eventually reaching your goals. So why do you think planning is really important to success in creative business?
What I find interesting is indeed, I see a lot of people, and the kind of metaphor that comes up for me is that they are quite happily sitting in a little boat in the middle of the ocean, going happily with the streams and the winds. But the reality is that if there's a wave or a bit more wind, then they blew over. And for me, planning is very much it is as important that you indeed do plan. It might not necessarily happen, but if you had started to take charge of what you want in your life and in your business, the chances of you actually getting there and creating that life that you want is far greater than if you're kind of sitting back and hoping for the best, because I don't think anything good is going to come from that. So I'm definitely one who says, have some goals in life, have some idea of what the life is that you want to create, and then make that happen.
Okay, awesome. So what are some of the specific things that make businesses successful by using planning?
I would say indeed it is about what do you want to create? Is it indeed a job for you? Yeah, and is that what you want to do? Is it a part-time job, a full-time job? I work with a lot of people who care for other people, for example, or indeed have children, and then even a small income, but having then a purpose and having a personal income can be incredibly important, even if it is fairly small in comparison to other people. So I think planning for that is really important. Like, what do you actually want to create? Is it a job? Is it a bigger business? Indeed, do you want to employ people? Do you want to teach people, for example, and share your passion and your skills? Or is it something bigger? Is it kind of, nearly in a way a movement? Is it other things that you want to change? And is it indeed like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? So I think it's really important, like, okay, what are you actually creating here? It's also around indeed then making things happen, and it's more likely, because again, like for example, in terms of marketing, really important that you plan ahead, that you work with like when people are most likely to buy, for example, because if you're launching at the wrong time of the year, you might get very few results. While if you would do it, sometimes 2 weeks later or 2 months later, you will get far better results. And again, if you plan and think ahead, because I see a lot of people wasting a lot of time and money and energy in not actually thinking it through what they're creating. They create a colorful collection and then go to market without actually having any market research done before, for example. So again, I think really important to get the best out of your limited resources, because we all have limited resources, is to make actually the best out of it and create what you want, and then hopefully get more success from it.
Awesome. So what are, we know the struggle is real, right? So what are some of the specific challenges that you've seen in creative businesses in your experience?
I think like jewelers, creative people, we love what we do. We're very much focused on the technical aspects and things like that. And they don't necessarily have the business skills. Very often don't consider themselves even to be businesses. So I think that's a bit of a big challenge. Do you think that anyone can learn business skills? I have a specific belief on that, but you do? Absolutely. Okay, cool. Awesome. I absolutely like, but it is indeed like, a great example there, for example, I very often work with women and they do okay. And then, for example, they get pregnant and then all of a sudden, it really matters to them to put money on the table. And basically, then all of a sudden, they become really organized. They really start marketing themselves. They take themselves a lot more seriously. And then all of a sudden, all these years before, they might have sort of, done it a bit more like a hobby. And then all of a sudden, it becomes serious. They take themselves serious. And all of a sudden, that business is actually really growing. So I think that's a really interesting thing. And I think it's more of a mindset than it is about skills, to be honest with you. I also think, indeed, that a lot of creatives work incredibly hard. They're not lazy, but it's about, are you doing the right things?
Exactly.
A lot of people spend a lot of time on the making side, on the creative side, but if nobody ever sees your work, then kind of what's the point of it? Like you do need to go out there and also again do the right things at the right time. Another thing I think again here is we have a lot of ideas as creatives, like there's no lack of ideas, let's be honest about that. But are we actually finishing projects? Are we kind of, shipping them, so to speak? Mm-hmm. Or are we indeed like such perfectionists very often that are so scared to take anything out there that it will never be good enough? We don't do anything. And I think that's, again, something for a lot of creatives. And especially, I would say, with jewelers, I see that very often, that our perfectionism takes over from the reality. And I think the last one there is around undervaluing and underselling what we do. And I think this is, again, slightly more women who have that as a challenge, I think, where indeed, like, we worry about what other people might think. We worry about, like, indeed, like, about earning too much or, what the ceiling is.
People, you think people worry about earning too much? I mean, I think that people do, but I think that's a mindset issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a lot of these things are indeed, like, start taking yourself seriously and think about indeed like what is going to work and plan that, and indeed like instead of spending a lot of time, actually becoming a bit more efficient, a bit more productive in certain areas can make a huge difference in your business.
It's so funny because like I never, like, a mindset issue for me was never like, am I going to earn too much money? I think that that's more of like at least in my psyche of like creative business, almost like a psychological glass ceiling, like I don't deserve to be successful, would be more of that. So that's an interesting perspective. I know that we've talked a lot about the cultural differences between people in the UK and Europe and the United States. But I think that it's a common theme that sort of comes around, but is maybe translated a little bit differently. So I want to dial back to one of the things that you said about productivity and how creatives are oftentimes really busy, but not busy doing the right things. So let's talk about how any sort of creative or jewelry designer or whatever you want to call it could become more productive and focused on creating the right kind of goals and stay on track with those goals.
Look, I think firstly, indeed, it's back to like, what do you want to create? If you don't know where you're going, you can't get there. So that's number one. Where are you getting to? So what's the direction there? I then also think back, it's about, like, as a sole trader, especially if you're running your own business, you need to have different hats on, yeah, and indeed, like, I think very importantly there is not just to look at the creative side, but you need to have that creative role, of course, but also a strategic role. Thinking bigger, yeah, and thinking broader. What is your vision, and are you working on your business, so to speak? Are you dealing with those things that, yeah, like tax or something like that you might prefer not to? Or, for example, systems. I'm a big fan of systems. It's not very sexy, but that is what will make your business grow. That's what makes your business more sustainable as well. I very often indeed say to people, this is my kind of time management tip, is spend around 40% of your time on making or producing or creative stuff, 40% on marketing, around 10% indeed on professional development, research, and about 10% on administration. And that's a very good balance for sustainable business. If you're spending a lot more time on making, then I just don't think that's sustainable. You need to spend an equal amount on marketing. And by the way, marketing, in my opinion, is incredibly creative. So it's not one or the other, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So let's stop here for a second. So 40% on making, 40% on marketing and sales. I would add sales into that because I think it's not just marketing. There's like selling that's involved in that. And then 10% on business development and like learning new things or working on the insides of your business. And then 10% on
the admin.
On the administrative part of the job. Okay, perfect. Yeah. I just wanted to like drive that home so people...
And I would say that it is percentages, because of course at certain times in the year, like for example, now we've got Christmas coming up. I would expect that most people spend 80-90% of their time on marketing and sales. Yeah, and like that's because otherwise, if you're not doing it now, you're not going to make what you want. Of course, like in January, February time, that might be more of a time of doing courses, doing professional development, doing some of that research in like what are new collections, etc. So that's why I give percentages, and also because some people might be running it as a part-time business. Therefore, again, it's better to give percentages than saying, okay, do this amount of hours per week, because it just doesn't work like that. Just going back to like becoming more productive, I think it's also about setting boundaries and really learning to say no. Again, if you've got a very clear focus, like for example, I get approached a lot, but people want to work with me, who want to do things. And I know really well what I do, what my niche is, who my clients are. And I think that makes it then really easy to actually attract the right people to work with. And also very easy to kind of say no to an awful lot of people, because it just isn't the right fit. Yeah, I've spent too much time in the past to indeed, working on projects that were very beneficial for other people, but not so beneficial for me. So I'm a lot clearer on what I'm good at and what I want to achieve. And I think also, there might be a bit of a funny kind of tip here, but I think it's really good to actually have children and to have a structure as such. Because, like, for example, for me, like, I pick up my kids from school here in the UK, that's at 3:15. I have not got a lot of time, so I need to be absolutely sufficient and very efficient with my time. So I work very specific hours during the day, then I take a break, and then again I work in the evenings. Indeed, I also work very often at weekends. I try not to, but sometimes it doesn't happen any other way. But again, I think what I very often see people who've got a lot of time they might actually be wasting more time because they've got that blank sheet of paper in front of them. People who very often, especially if they have another job or other responsibilities, are a lot more effective with their time and are actually better in saying no to things or getting off track. So those would be my kind of tips around being more productive. And work on both, like, where do you want to go? What is important to you? Are you working on that?
Absolutely. So the next piece of the productivity thing is really setting the right kind of goals. So how do you inspire people to set the right kind of goals? I know you sort of talked a little bit about it, but I want to specifically hit on that topic so that we're really driving the point home.
Yeah, I love to talk about juicy goals. Yes, so indeed, it's stretch yourself a little bit. Don't overstretch, because again, then you set yourself up for failure. But get that feeling of, if you get butterflies in your tummy, if you get a bit excited about it, that's what you're aiming for here.
Exactly. Something that scares you a little bit, but is also achievable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like somebody recently was telling me or was talking to me about what is scaring you in your business and what excites you. And actually, very often those two things are very, very similar. So I think it needs to be something that's juicy and also something that's you. Yeah, very often we kind of go by default and look at other businesses. Maybe we are still listening to our parents or partners or things like that. I think it's really important that you actually really think, what is it for you that's important? At the beginning of the year, I tend to set 3 big juicy goals for myself. I've realized over the years, 3 seems to be the right amount of numbers for me, because if you set loads of goals, it's not going to happen. And again, half of it will not be completed by the end of the year. But get something that you really want to put your teeth in, so to speak. Also make them positive. So very often people talk about what they don't want. And I would suggest really look at what's the opposite of the don't. Yeah, because again, very often that can get you to the real thing. And of course, very much in line with what Stephen Covey says about these things, I think it's very important to look at what with the end in mind. Yeah, so indeed, he talks about your funeral. I don't really go that way, but I talk about, it is your 80th birthday. What do you want to achieve by then? Indeed, by the end of the year, what would you like to achieve by then? And then work backwards instead of thinking about, what is in your diary tomorrow.
Exactly. I want to stop you there really quickly, because that's an important piece of the puzzle. I mean, I think there's 2 pieces there, setting yearly goals, but then also thinking bigger picture, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? What do you want to be known for? What do you want people to remember you for? I think that's what Stephen Covey is going for, and what you mean by the 80th birthday comment, right?
Yeah, exactly, because it is that bigger picture. And I think, again, also with setting your goals, it's that great question. If you ask yourself, why do you want that? And you keep asking yourself, why is that? Because for example, saying I want more income. Yeah, it's why do you want more income? Okay, because then I get financial security, or I can buy myself a bigger space, or why is that important? And the more you go into that deeper level, the more you go into your values, that is where I think it becomes really rich, and where indeed then there are different ways of getting there, and you become a lot more motivated about what really makes you tick, I think, and that's again that's where it becomes really juicy for you and indeed for your family, for example. And I think that will then make it a lot more interesting. And again, I think it's not setting goals for the sake of setting goals, but really uncovering why that is important to you, and that will then help you also to stick to your goals a lot more.
Yeah, because there's different reasons why different goals mean different things to different people. How do you stay on track, to make sure that you're working towards your goals and getting things done, being productive and all that stuff?
Yeah. I think it's really important to have a clear vision. I did some research early in the year for a conference here in Scotland called Small is Beautiful. And it was really interesting. I had more than 400 responses to the questionnaire around successful businesses and things like that. And it was very apparent to me that the more successful financially, but also in purpose, successfully businesses, they had a very clear vision of what they wanted to achieve, and they They also knew exactly what their strengths and weaknesses were. They really could say, okay, in 5 years I need to do this, 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 and this, and in the next 1 or 2 years I need to do that. So they really had worked out not just where they want to get to, but also indeed like how to get there. They really knew how to get from A to B, yeah, and I think that's really important. It's also because, of course, when you're running a business, you've got so many things going on, and a lot of people indeed say to me, like, how do I make time for all this change? Yeah, and change is not easy. Yeah, like we're used to what we're used to, and to make strategic changes in your business can be really tricky. Yeah, and like indeed, like New Year's resolutions by the 3rd week of January, very often we are not on track anymore. So, but again, it's about like keep on track, and indeed, like it's about like how can other people help you? Be aware of what works for you. Be aware of what you need to stay on track. Are there certain kind of motivations, for example? Are there certain carrots, for example, where you really celebrate the in-between stages of you reaching certain goals in your life and in your business? Or indeed, like, does it help you more to get certain stakes, for example? Yeah, and get kind of punished in a way. Yeah. One time, indeed, when I was doing coaching, they suggested that you would support, for example, a charity that you were really against. Yeah, and if you wouldn't reach your goals, that you would actually have to spend money with them. And it's things like that. What works for you? Can you work that out?
What motivates you? Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's also about making time for change. So, for example, with my 3 juicy goals, sometimes I need quite a bit of time, yeah, where I really say, like, I want to work a week on that and really get my head around an idea or a problem. Like, for example, writing a book, I need to have a lot of time, a lot of thinking time. So I can do that, for example, the first week of the month, for example, and I really put that in my diary. But then also there are more strategic ongoing things, like indeed rebranding or redoing a website, for example. I think that's something, things that people struggle with. And I would say, for example, with that, it's not necessarily about doing it in 1 week, but actually make every Friday then your website day or your branding day and work on it bit by bit, but make time for it in your diary and take it seriously. Put it in as an appointment with yourself. I think that will really help you to get where you want to get to.
Absolutely. So you're coming out with a tool that helps you sort of create the vision and plan backwards in order to achieve that vision. So tell us a little bit about Dream Plan Do.
So Dream Plan Do is very much based indeed on my research and my work as a creative business advisor and coach for nearly 15 years now. And basically it's very much based on 2 things. So it's about dreaming, planning and doing. Very often we're good in one thing, but not necessarily in the other thing. So the dreaming is very much about that big vision, the strategic thinking, the bigger picture, your legacy. Then the planning bit is about getting from A to B. But also it's about prioritizing, focusing about the things that you're not doing, yeah, and really making time again for those changes in your business. And then it's about doing the right things at the right time of the year. We're very good in doing, the creative side of it, but are you actually doing enough marketing, for example? And so what I've done with this, it's a planner, a book. It's 12 months, and what I've seen with a lot of craft and jewelry businesses is they're very cyclical, they're very seasonal kind of businesses. So what I've done here is basically split up through the year 12 monthly topics. So for example, in January, we're very much looking at the year ahead of us. In February, we're looking at finance and setting financial goals and improving your financial management. And every month, we're tackling certain kind of topics in a series of creative exercises, thought-provoking questions, because it's not always straightforward. And again, it's also uncovering some of the things that you stop doing yourself, so to speak, and that mindset that we talked about. And each month, indeed, we'll also have like a checkup. So at the beginning of the year, you set financial and marketing goals, and every month you will check out, indeed, like how far have you got with that? How many contacts did you make that month? How many events are you working on? How are you doing on social media? And every month will also have specific kind of marketing tips, and also indeed like you can put in your own. So it really will help people. It's really using all the tricks that I've learned over the years to really get people to break down their bigger goals and to then actually make that happen and take action and keep on track. And of course, sometimes you go off a bit, but it's about what you continue to do on a day-to-day basis, creating that business that you want.
Awesome. So how can we access this Dream Planner? Actually, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to create a link, flourishthriveacademy.com/Dream Plan Do. And you can go check out the planner that Patricia is creating. Sounds amazing because there's nothing better than having everything really in one place, in my opinion. And it's a physical book, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So, because again, like I think it's so important to put pen to paper. And I find with a lot of creative people, we love thinking it through, and it's a way of recording. It's kind of, the book is can be quite personal, of course. It can be a bit like a journal. And we also have got a big wall planner for the year, so then people can plan out on that kind of more monthly or quarterly kind of level. And also indeed we've got a 111 club. So, and that is very much for 111 creative businesses from all across the world, I hope. We will really feel like, hey, this is a like-minded group of ambitious creative people, and ambitious is a good word, where we indeed like really will support each other, get an accountability that we all need to indeed create that business that we want.
Awesome. So go check that out over at flourishthriveacademy.com/Dream Plan Do. That's flourishthriveacademy.com/Dream Plan Do. And we'll have a link in the show notes as well, and on the blog post that goes with this episode. Patricia, thank you so much for showing up today and for sharing with us your wisdom about how to be more productive and how to actually plan to reach our creative visions.
You're very welcome. It's always great to hear you there in New York, Tracy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Wasn't that awesome? Patricia is a wealth of knowledge. Make sure that you pop on over to the show notes over at flourishthriveacademy.com/episode 64. That's flourishthriveacademy.com/episode 64. We mentioned a couple resources in there, and I want to make sure that you can grab them all. In the show notes, we're going to give you access to how you can find out a little bit more about Dream Plan Do. And then we also have links to Seth Godin's book. And also, I know that we spoke a lot about systems and creating processes in your business. So we're going to give you a few resources to help make your productivity a little bit better in your business. So pop on over to flourishthriveacademy.com/episode 64. Thanks so much for joining me on today's episode. As usual, it's been a pleasure to be here. Until next time, take care. This is Tracy Matthews signing off.